For those of you who could not attend the live Water Resources Outlook from the Southeast RFC, here's the recording of the Winter and Spring 2015-2016 El Nino Outlook. The outline for today's briefing is as follows. The current conditions in the southeast and climatology, that's what we'll talk about first. Then we'll ask, what is El Nino? Hopefully we'll give you a little bit of an idea of what it is. We'll look back at a specific 1997 and 1998 El Nino, which looks similar to what we're seeing now, just to kind of maybe get a feel for what we're going to see. And then the forecast from the Climate Prediction Center for the coming winter into spring, and stream flow forecasts and river flood threat for the southeast United States from Jeff Dober. First, let's look at the 30-day rainfall summary. The upper left graphic shows the total rainfall from the last 30 days, which includes the heavy rainfall that caused all the flooding in Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina. As you can see from the percent of normal and departure from normal graphics, the Carolinas experienced some extreme rainfall that brought some significant and some cases deadly flooding. Alabama, Mississippi, and the southern two-thirds of Georgia and Florida did not have any flooding, but also have gotten drier. When we take a longer-term look here, 180 days, we will notice how much rain was received this past month in South Carolina. Before the heavy rains, South Carolina was beginning to enter moderate to severe drought in some areas. Around the rest of the southeast, the area that has seen the heaviest rainfall over the long term has been the western half of the peninsula of Florida. As we will see in a little, the higher than normal flows in the rivers in western Florida continues. The lack of rain in some areas will be reflected in the stream flows and reservoirs, as we will see in just a little. And as you can see, drought has been almost completely removed from the Virginia and the Carolinas. Recent rainfall wiped out whatever was left in those areas. The rain didn't reach into western portion of our area, and therefore we have some abnormally dry and moderate drought in Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and the panhandle of Florida. Drought has not become a big story in the southeast due to at least near normal rainfall in the region, and then sadly, heavy rainfall recently. So what has that done to our rivers in the southeast? I've got two pictures to show you. The first is the 28-day average stream flow. This shows the much above normal stream flows across the Carolinas and Virginia. As we move west, we see some above normal mixed with near normal, and then into Alabama and Mississippi, where we see below and much below normal stream flows. Quite a contrast across the area. Central Florida rivers remain near to above normal. For the peninsula of Florida, the rivers should normally be coming down as we exit the wet season and move into the dry time of the year. The other picture is the 7-day average stream flow. This is a little removed from the heavy rain that hit parts of Georgia and to the north and the east. There has been some recovery in parts, and stream flows are getting back to normal in some of these areas. Hence, all of the green you see on the map, and some light blue and some brown to indicate some above and below normal flows. Fortunately, for those hit by the rain, there has been very little rain to aggravate conditions. As for the areas that are below normal, they could use some rain, which, as we start to look ahead, they should get. Before we begin to talk about what is above and below normal rainfall, let's take a look at what is normal across the southeast for November through March. For November, you can see the dryness moving into Florida. Some wetness starting to creep in from the west into Mississippi and Alabama and the North Georgia mountains. December comes decidedly more wet for the Gulf Coast states, and wetness starts to move into the Carolinas. There is a consistent wet pattern that stays over the Gulf states and spreads into the Carolinas in late winter and early spring. These normals are updated each year as we get more data. One graphic a little later show how the last 15 years have not been nearly as wet as the previous 50. When we look at that recharge graphic, it might give a different perspective about the recharge season in the southeast. But until then, here are the reservoirs in the southeast. We will take a quick look at these as we get closer to the winter and impacts of rain on reservoirs. We will discuss where these reservoirs are with respect to their guide curves and normal. For now, know that the reservoirs on the Savannah, those in North Georgia, are all below normal. Across the rest of the southeast, most of the reservoirs are near normal. Again, we will address many of these reservoir questions in other water resource outlooks as we get closer to impacts from the rain.
So what is El Nino? Many of us have begun hearing about El Nino in the news and how it may create all this different weather across the country, some true, some maybe not. But what really is El Nino? Simply put, El Nino is the period when the ocean waters become warmer than normal in the eastern equatorial Pacific. Though more importantly, why does this matter so much? Well, it matters because the oceans and the global weather patterns are connected in many ways. These ocean temperatures can influence the weather patterns across the world, including right here in the southeast U.S. What has been this influence in the past? Todd will show you.
Now let's take a look back to a year that looks very similar to what we are facing. This is the 1997 and 98 El Nino year. The first graphic I would like to show you from that year is a 3-month accumulated rainfall graphic. This gives a pretty good idea where the heaviest rainfall was located. During that year, there would be rain out west with Pacific moisture. That moisture would continue to feed the lows that would develop in the western Gulf of Mexico and move across the southeast, adding Gulf moisture to the mix. This would happen every 3 to 4 days. After a while, the rain adds up, and here is what you get. Here's the percent of normal rainfall for the December through February time frame of that year. Even during the normal rainfall years, we expect to have some flooding in the southeast. During this year, nearly everyone in the southeast saw flooding on the rivers. Here is the divisional precipitation rank for that year. 121 shows the wettest year for that division. You can see that most of the southeast saw much above normal rainfall during that year, or record rainfall even for that time period. And here's a snapshot of the stream flows on March 14th of that year and where the flooding was occurring. It may paint the picture of what could happen this winter. We use this as the closest and most recent example of a strong El Nino. However, there have been other events in the past that have had different outcomes. Jeff's stream flow analysis will incorporate those other moderate to strong El Ninos later in the presentation. Here's a look at the southeast precipitation from January to March since 1950. The black line in the middle shows the average precipitation for that time frame for 1901 to 2000. In the span from 1950 through 2000, there are some above and some below normal years during that time. This has always been considered a recharge period for the southeast reservoir, and also a traditional time of flooding. Take notice of the period between 99 and now. Many of these years have been below that average, and even the years that are above are barely above. Seems our recharge period isn't the same as it used to be. The fall has seen more rains, and other times of year have added to our rain totals. However, I remember the 2000s as being a time of drought for the southeast. Not all the time, but more than what we had in the past. Will this trend continue? Only time will tell. So now that we have looked in the past, let's look at the forecast for the future. Here's our most recent model ENSO predictions. The models have been very consistent in the past 6 months or so, showing that this would be a moderate to strong El Nino, and it seems that they have gotten it right. If that trend continues, we will remain that way through the winter season, which is most impacted by an El Nino in the southeast. And now our forecast from the Climate Prediction Center. Our first forecast is for temperatures in November. Warmer than normal temperatures are expected, at least to begin with. This could keep the southeast drying out some. By this time of year, the temperatures have a little less impact on evaporation out of lakes and water bodies across the southeast. Take a look at our precipitation forecast. We could be dry early, but by the middle of the month, patterns can start to shift to a more wet pattern. The timing on when that pattern will change to a more wet pattern will hopefully start showing up in the models, and the Southeast RFC will be watching those patterns both in the models and real time to prepare for potential problems from that rainfall. Our temperature forecast puts us in equal chances of above normal and below normal temperatures for the November through January time frame. This looks reasonable. The precipitation forecast is following along with our expectations of an increased chance of above normal rainfall across the whole southeast. For this reason, we have done this briefing and are preparing ourselves and hopefully you for a very active winter into spring. Cooler than normal temperatures are forecast for the February through April timeframe. We are not expecting more frozen precipitation during this time because of this. Yes, it could still happen, but this will probably be more cloudy conditions during this time and not warming as much as we have gotten used to during the days of winter. We may end up with less of a wide range between the highs and the lows and a shift down in temperatures over a long period. However, with all the precipitation expected, if temps to dip down low enough, it could be very interesting. It's not expected, but still possible. As you see, the rain is expected to continue through the April time frame, and that will be the problem as this becomes a very long stretch of above normal rain during our recharge season. That is why we have such a big concern for potential flooding for this winter into spring, and Jeff will address those stream flow forecasts now.
So Todd has provided you some insight into how El Nino could affect precipitation and temperature across the southeast, but what does this mean for stream flows and our water resources, as well as future river flood potential? Let's look at stream flows first and look at North Carolina first. When looking at past El Ninos, we can derive analogs of what stream flows did in the past with El Nino periods. In this study, we used moderate to strong El Ninos going back to 1950. The pie charts represent those probabilities of stream flows on average from November to April falling into one of three categories: above normal, or the top third of the data set from 1950 to 2010, near normal, or the middle range of the data set, or below normal. So for North Carolina, we see the best chances are for above normal stream flows from the Roanoke and the Swan to the Cape Fear River by about 50 to 60%, with a smaller chance, 20 to 30%, near normal, and an even smaller chance, roughly 10 to 20%, below normal. So what we see here is the best chances are for above normal stream flows, but this is not a guarantee. There is still a slight chance at below normal flows. Looking at South Carolina, we see much of the same across the Savannah, Santee, and Pee Dee watersheds. The most likely outcome for stream flows from late fall to early spring is for above normal stream flows, with the least chance scenario at below normal stream flows. Even further south into Georgia and the Apalachicola and Altamaha watersheds, more of the same. Looks like above normal stream flows is your best odds, and below normal stream flows is the low chance bet. Then down to the Gulf Coast, the same, but below normal chances decrease even more and now become about a 1 in 10 chance. Above normal stream flows are the best chance, with near normal in the 30 to 40% range. And west into Alabama, the chances between the three categories are not as spread out and clear. The above and near normal chance is still the prominent category, but the probabilities of above normal are not as high as farther east, and this ties in with what Todd has shown with the precipitation chances. Better chances of above normal to the south and east in the southeast. And then finally, the Florida Peninsula, where we see the best signal and the highest probabilities for above normal. Chances for above normal stream flows in these watersheds are closer to 60 to 70%, with very small chances for below normal stream flows. With that being said, keep in mind that stream flows are generally low this time of year in the region, as this is the dry season for the Florida Peninsula. So above normal stream flows doesn't necessarily mean above normal flooding threat. So all in all, we see from the pie charts that there will likely be above normal stream flows in many watersheds on average from late fall to early spring in the southeast. As we also can see, there is no guarantee. There's still small chances at below normal, but these would be the riskier chance and are not likely. So stream flows are going to be higher, most likely, but what about river flooding and the river flood threat? Again, let's look at a historical perspective. We see the graph here shows us the number of river floods compared to normal relative to the ENSO condition. So if the number of floods in a particular month for a certain ENSO condition was 100%, then the number of floods would be the same as the average over all years. As you can see, this is not the case, as there is differences between the number of river floods for each month starting in July and the ENSO condition, especially for month 11. That's month 11 there, that's November, through month 6, and that's, of course, June. We see that in moderate to strong El Niños, the number of river floods is much higher, with percentages well above 100% of average from November through June. December, historically, we have seen over 200% of normal as far as the number of river floods, are basically twice the average. So what can we pull from this? And is that we see in November there is a definite uptick in river flooding in the southeast, with past moderate to strong El Niños, and this lasts all the way into June. So we always show you our flood climatology. What would this look like adjusted to a moderate to strong El Nino year? And we see here pronounced increases in the numbers and threat in late November and into December and all the way through April. Some increase in late spring and early summer, but we generally do not see much flooding at that time, so the limited numbers get adjusted only slightly. So when may we see the increase in stream flow? Well, as early as November, we may see stream flows increase, and these may be elevated on average through late spring. This will begin increasing our flood threat as well in this period. And when we talk about flood threat, what areas are we most concerned with given the precipitation outlooks, the current conditions, and the past analogs used in El Nino? We see our greatest concerns with the river basins in the western sections of the Florida Peninsula, from the Suwannee watershed down to the smaller watersheds in central Florida near Tampa, which received so much rain this past September. This is the area where above average river flooding is likely during the period. Also, I would like to point out that river flooding is not very common in the Florida Peninsula during the dry season or the winter time period, so above average may not necessarily mean more river flooding than we saw in the fall for this location. The areas where above average river flooding is probable covers most of the southern half of the southeast, including the coastal rivers, many of which flooded this October. This includes the Gulf Coast rivers in southern Alabama, most of central Georgia like the Flint and the Oconee, Ocmulgee and the Altamaha, as well as many of the larger rivers below reservoirs in the Carolinas, mainly south and east of the line from Columbia to Raleigh to Norfolk, Virginia. And finally, above average river flooding will be possible depending on exactly how far north the better precipitation events get across the remainder of the southeast, which is the northern tier, northern half of the region. This is where we are a little less certain, but still the chances are better than a typical year for above average flooding. So this is our general river flood threat forecast for this fall into spring, given the unique moderate to strong El Nino conditions that can cause.
And so, the bottom line, wet in Virginia, the Carolinas, and Floridas, and right now dryness in Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi. Strong El Nino to dominate during the winter and spring. We will be watching for other factors as we enter our recharge season. This could be the Arctic Oscillation, this could be the North Atlantic Oscillation. There are other things that might impact our weather, so we'll have to watch those as well. Tight gradients across the southeast between wet in the south and drier somewhat as you go north and west. Still an expectation of higher than normal river flooding in the southeast, and if we get to April and the southeast has seen a normal year, we would be pleasantly surprised. However, that is still a possibility. So just so you know, just because we're predicting a wetter winter, there still could be a chance we'd be normal. And there, as we show in the stream flows, we could see normal weather during that time. Just an increased chance for above normal rainfall. Make sure that you check out all our decision support services. Many of you are receiving the HVA, the Daily Operational Support Message during a flood. You're obviously listening to the Water Resources Outlook. Hopefully you're taking advantage of all our hydrographs in our area. If you need more information about things that we offer, go check out our webpage, or you can email me or Jeff Dober, and we will get back to you and hopefully provide the information that you need. Thank you for listening, and we will get back to normal water resources outlooks next month.